this thing. Thank you. Thing verification crap.
Welcome to Points West and BBC News Channel Special with Sabet Chow.
Rose West, wife, mother, serial killer.
So far, they've unearthed 3 sets of remains.
This is humanity, if you can call it that, at its worst.
Her terrible crimes are often overshadowed by her murderous husband, Fred. But exactly what role did she play in their twisted relationship?
She's an evil, wicked woman.
What appeared to be some human hair was discovered, and underneath this were human remains.
What drove this woman to commit some of the most barbaric murders the country has ever seen?
They said, when we finished with you, we're gonna kill you and bury you under the paving stones of Gloucester.
From the outside, she appeared to be the very model of normality. But the events that unfolded at number 25 Cromwell Street truly were crimes that shook Britain.
Hidden behind smoked glass and under heavy escort, Rosemary West was inside the courts building within 5 minutes.
October 1995, and Winchester Crown Court was prepared for what was billed as the trial of the century.
There were authors there were courtroom artists, there was the international media. It was an absolute media scrum. That didn't detract from the seriousness of it all. This was a woman on trial for her liberty.
In the dock, a 41-year-old woman who faced 10 charges of murder. One of the victims included her own daughter. Her name was Rosemary Pauline West.
We were not spared any of the graphic details about what had become of these poor girls. There was the pathological evidence, which all pointed up to some form of sadistic behaviour against them whilst they were still alive, culminating in their death.
The look on the jury's face was disbelief. Even in the overview, in the opening speeches, the content of what was to follow was abhorrent.
Rosemary West appeared in the dock. She seemed to show little emotion to most of the evidence. The time that she did show tears or drop her head was when there was reference to Heather, her daughter. Whether this was play acting, whether it was real, it was very hard to tell.
The events that led to Winchester Crown Court that October began years earlier, when Bill and Daisy Letts gave birth to their 5th child, a girl, who they named Rosemary.
Rose was born 29th of November 1953 in a little seaside town in North Devon called Northam. It was very picturesque, quite remote in the winter, but in the summer absolutely idyllic.
Growing up in Northam, I have lovely memories, beautiful memories really. It was all farmland, fields, we had the sea. And we just got up on school holidays. We lived down the farm, full of mud and sand, and there was always a big meal on the table. It was great.
This idyllic environment belied a harsh home life for the Letts children, who grew up in conditions that were far from serene.
Rose was clearly brought up in a very dysfunctional house. I mean, her father, Bill Letts, was a very strange man.
Rose's father was a despot in his own home. So people would see this very charming man, but behind closed doors, he was very violent to his wife, Daisy. He was violent to some of the children. Rose was to some extent protected from that because he knew she was slightly slower than the other children. She could never keep up. And the other children would call her Dozy Rosie.
There were a number of difficulties in the family, a number of abusive experiences that she had that I think are useful in helping understand how she developed as a young girl and then as an adolescent, and then made her vulnerable to develop into the offender that she became. Then you have her mother, who suffered from severe depression. I mean, her mother was apparently being treated with electroconvulsive therapy when she was pregnant with Rose.
We lived next door to the Letts family, and we all knew that the children they didn't have a good life. They never went out very much at all. They were never allowed to get dirty, them children, no. That's why they just walked around the garden. They didn't play in the garden, they just walked around, all sort of stiff-armed and, just walked around. But in the end, I don't think anybody bothered with the kids, really. They weren't allowed out of that wall.
As well as the violence at home, young Rose was also the victim of sexual abuse.
I think Rose's sisters just wanted to get away from there, whereas, curiously, Rose kind of accepted the regime and was the subject of terrible sexual abuse from Bill Letts. When I took a proof of evidence from her, it was a sanitised version of her early life that she gave, where the darker, sinister side was dealt with by symbols almost. There was this man in a dark cape and dark hat, almost a shadow following her as a child when she'd walk. And that was about as near as she'd get.
It might be the case that she learnt to placate her father through the sexual abuse that happened. She might also have particular ways of dealing with her father that mean that she escapes his brutality.
When Rose was 13, the family left Devon and moved to the village of Bishop's Cleeve, some 15 miles from Gloucester. It was only a few years later that, in 1969, young Rose Letts would meet Fred West for the first time.
Rose was waiting at a bus stop when she met Fred. Fred had, she said herself, had ganky green teeth, he was smelly, but she said he could charm the birds off the trees. When it came to meeting Fred, who came from an even more extreme background than Rose, it was a perfect storm. It was an accident waiting to happen.
It is very often forgotten how she came to meet Frederick West in the first place and her age when she did, and that while she may have been young and perhaps somewhat sexually active, Frederick West, 12 years her senior, was a man of the world.
Fred West was born in 1941 in the Gloucestershire village of Muchmarcle. At the age of 21, he married Catherine Costello, also known as Rena. After a year of marriage and living in Scotland, Rena gave birth to a daughter, Charmaine, although it appears Fred was not her father. A year later, a second daughter arrived, Anne-Marie. The family moved to the southwest, but after a turbulent few years of marriage, Fred found himself bringing up the girls alone.
All of a sudden, you've got him having this association with a young Rosemary West, who was quite attractive for her age, who had with him to look after 2 children. And she very quickly moved in with him into a caravan, and she was brought into whatever Frederick West's world was.
Fred West's world was in fact dominated by sex. He harbored an interest in pornography, prostitution and sadism, and he was soon encouraging Rose to join in. A year later, and with Rose pregnant, Fred moved his growing family to a new home in Gloucester at 25 Midland Road.
She was quite heavily pregnant by the time they moved to Midland Road. She would be 17 at this time. So you've got a 17-year-old who's got a baby. She has Heather, her first child, and then 2 little girls to look after. You have already this kind of strange sex life where Fred would want to spy on her, to push her to have sex with friends, you know, people that they knew in the road. All of this was a lot for a young girl to cope with. And, you know, what chance had she had just from home straight into this situation?
Sometime in March 1971, when Rose had yet to turn 18, young Charmaine went missing. And whilst the Wests claimed she had gone to live with her natural mother and Fred's first wife, Rena, the truth was far more sinister. Fred and Rose West were married in January 1972. Later that year, the family moved from their flat in Midland Road to a new home at 25 Cromwell Street. Although Fred put bachelor on his marriage certificate, there was no record of him having divorced his first wife, Rena. Along with the couple were their children, Anne-Marie, Heather, and their new arrival, May. Of young Charmaine, the daughter from Fred's first marriage, there was no sign.
25 Cromwell Street is not a large property. It was small. It was even smaller by the time we had placed numerous small walls inside to make little cells of places where people could sleep.
In moving to Cromwell Street, the Wests had overstretched themselves financially. To supplement Fred's income as a builder, he began altering the inside of the new house so it could accommodate lodgers.
The house was on 3 floors, and as it turned out, a basement as well. But the rooms were very small and very close together. And to have a family there, and probably then half a dozen lodgers, the place would have been packed, and it would have been very difficult to come and go without hearing footsteps on the stairs.
As well as rent from lodgers, Fred West also earned money on the side from minor criminal activities.
The best way to describe him was a petty thief. Someone who would be able to deal and wheel with most people, had convictions for minor offences of theft of metal, that sort of thing, scaffolding. He had served minor terms of imprisonment during the times of his life.
Only a few months after they moved to Cromwell Street, however, Fred and Rose would come to the attention of police for a far more serious matter.
I met Fred and Rose when I was hitchhiking back in 1972. This car pulled up with a couple in, and the girl opened the window and started asking me where I was going, and she seemed really friendly, not much older than me. And they said, oh, we'll give you a lift as far as Gloucester.
Caroline Roberts got on well with Fred and Rose, and when they offered her a job as their nanny, she was only too pleased to accept.
I actually got on quite well with Rose straight from the start. I suppose it was because there was just a slight age difference. She was quite tactile as well. She liked to play, she'd look at my hair and say, oh, I love your hair, and I think you've got lovely hair, lovely eyes. She's very tactile.
While she got on with Rose, Caroline grew concerned about Fred's behaviour.
I realised after a couple of days of being there that he was very hands-on with Rose. He was forever grabbing hold of her. We would sometimes grope her over her clothes or put a hand up her skirt when she was doing something at the cooker. But worse was his bragging. He seemed to brag about really strange things as well. Like he told me, if you ever get pregnant, don't you worry, because I can do abortions. I've done them before. But it wasn't till about a week before I left there that he mentioned Anne-Marie, who was 8. He said that she wasn't a virgin, and Anne-Marie was in the room at the time, and I saw her head go down, and I thought, I think maybe there might be some kind of abuse going on.
Concerned. These are the people I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I really didn't remember about that kiss for a very long time. Actually, it didn't come until almost the very, very end of all my memories. In fact, that was probably one of the very last flashbacks I had. And until I had that memory, I really felt at a loss. And somehow, that I love you that came across in that kiss has been enough for me to make peace with the loss and to go on with my life and just keep their memory in my soul and in my heart.
Miriam lived with her natural parents until she married at the age of 21. At the age of 47, she began her search for Mike and Pat.
Their names were Pat and Mike, and I think their last name was McGuire.
According to Miriam, her mother admits that Miriam's father had emotional problems and that life was often difficult. However, Miriam says her mother denies that she was ever placed in foster care, which has prompted suggestions that Miriam might suffer from false memory syndrome and that Mike and Pat might never have existed.
The question of whether all of this is made up certainly arises because it's hard to believe that people could be this way.
All right.
But I can't help but believe that this is the absolute truth. There may be a certain amount of condensation and distortion around the edges, but essentially, I think that the story is accurate and it was relayed in a truthful manner, especially since all during the relation of this tale, Miriam was wanting to get out of the treatment.
Her emotional reactions to the pieces and to the whole were consistent with a real event and not with a fantasy. And in repeated flashbacks, we got the beautiful picture of these marvelous foster parents. And without these months with two loving parents, she might not have survived.
They gave me a lot. They saved me from despair, and I would like them to know that there was a good outcome. I just pray that their lives are wonderful and that they've had happiness, and I hope that I'll get a chance to be reunited with them and share with them the good things that I have in my life.
Miriam believes that she lived with her foster parents in 1945 or 1946 when she was between 3 and 4 years old. She remembers their last name as McGuire. Neither records of a court hearing nor records of foster care for Miriam have been found. However, the Dade County Clerk's Office says this was not unusual in Florida during the period right after World War II.
Along the Pacific coast, the hunt is on for the Jap submarine that brought the war to U.S. soil.
In 1942, the final outcome of World War II was still very much in doubt. The United States had every reason to fear a Japanese invasion of its western shores.
There were known to be Japanese submarines operating off the coast. There had been an attack on an oil refinery down near Santa Monica, Los Angeles. There was a great fear that there would be more attacks.
One response to the threat was unusual, to say the least. The Navy assembled an unlikely fleet of 12 odd-sized blimps to monitor possible enemy activity along the California coastline. The mission of Airship Squadron 32, though critical, was largely routine and uneventful until August 16, 1942. That day, an airship on its regular patrol made a spectacular descent and crashed to Earth with no one on board. Incredibly, its two-man crew had vanished, and no trace of them was ever found. The legend of the ghost blimp had been born.
It was almost impossible for him not to have been seen by somebody, but nobody saw him go, nobody saw him jump, and there's no relics of them at all. A real puzzle.
It was perhaps the strangest home front incident of the Second World War. So strange that many remember it as if it happened only yesterday. Throughout the entire war, Airship Squadron 32 lost only the 2 men who disappeared on that patrol. 50 years later, their exact fate is still unknown, and the mystery surrounding the ghost blimp remains a subject of endless fascination. Sunday, August 16th, 1942. The flight of the Ghost blimp began like hundreds of others had. Just after 6 a.m., a blimp designated Flight 101 prepared to take off.
Looks good today.
Flight 101's pilots were 27-year-old Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody and 34-year-old Ensign Charles Ellis Adams. Both were experienced and reliable, all the more reason to wonder about what would occur over the next 5 hours.
Good. Lieutenant Cody was a thoroughly experienced pilot. He had many, many hours in this particular type of an aircraft. He was called a very cool, determined, if somewhat taciturn officer.
Adams had flown in the large dirigibles and was thoroughly checked out, but he had never flown in the small blimps. And this was an indoctrination flight for him that Sunday morning.
Aviation machinist mate Riley Hill was assigned a crew for Adams and Cody that morning. But just before departure, Hill was inexplicably ordered to leave the ship.
No need for you to go, Riley. Adams and I will take it. Yes, sir.
Hill now believes heavy moisture in the air was weighing the blimp down, making it unwise to take off with 3 men aboard.
So I got out, shut the door and locked it, closed, and they took off.
The flight plan called for the 101 to depart Treasure Island, pass over the Golden Gate Bridge, then head to the Farallon Islands 25 miles off the coast. From there, the patrol would continue north to Point Reyes, then south along the coastline. The first leg proceeded without incident. An hour and a half after takeoff at 7:38 a.m., Lieutenant Cody had radioed squadron headquarters at Moffett Field. Position 4 miles east of the Farallons. Stand by. 4 minutes later, Cody called again.
Investigating suspicious oil slick. Stand by.
Go 101.
Those were the last words ever received from Flight 101.
Go 101.
When it came time for further explanation, and we didn't get it, we just assumed, well, that was negative, and they went on their way. Then it came time for the hourly position report, and that didn't come in. And the second one didn't come in. And that's when we began to feel that something was grossly wrong, and we just could not believe that our radios weren't working because we had good radio crew and the machinery was working.
After more than 3 hours of radio silence, personnel at Moffett Field grew increasingly alarmed. Frantic attempts to contact the blimp went unanswered.
Any word yet? No, sir. No communications from the crew since the report at 7:42.
I'm investigating suspicious oil slick.
Yes, sir. Flight 101.
Finally, a message was received, but not from Flight 101.
San Francisco Shore Patrol. One blimp crossed beach at Playland. Crashed into the golf course. It dropped the depth charge. Peeled it off.
Let's get a team over there right away.
The blimp had come ashore just south of San Francisco. Flight 101 had inexplicably drifted 8 miles off course.
There was a swimmer there, a man called Mr. Capovilla, who was standing ready to go into the water, and all of a sudden he saw this huge gray mass just coming right at him. Now remember, this thing is 47 feet wide, and it wasn't too high off the water. And he watched it come in, it dragged its wheel along the sand at the water's edge, then hit a little sand knoll. It bounced up into the air and then slid up a little bit of a canyon and then hit rather heavily on the side of the canyon, and this knocked off what turned out to be a depth charge. Relieved of the weight, the L8 then soared up into the overcast again and out of sight of this Mr. Capovilla and began to drift inland, I guess with the winds, over Daly City.
The rapidly deflating blimp was seen by hundreds of people. Bunny Gillespie was 16 years old at the time.
I was on the way home from Sunday school, and I saw this big gray thing coming in over what I thought was going to be right over Templeton Avenue. When I saw this thing coming in through the sky, I was very surprised, as were a lot of other people, because things like that just didn't happen in Daly City.
Flight 101 was quickly losing altitude and in danger of becoming entangled in power lines. The blimp was on a collision course with the steep hills in Daly City. One woman's house almost became the point of impact.
It was a Mrs. Appleton. She said that all of a sudden this huge behemoth had settled and scraped across the top of her roof, and she said it sounded like chains dragging. But the entire house was blacked out because of the size of this thing, and she raced to the front window wondering what in the world was going on, and she saw the rest of it, the gondola, hit the cross arm, break off part of the mechanism there, and gradually settled down to the ground.
I missed the actual landing of the thing, but when I got there, it was just like a great big gray monster with the gondola jutting up into the towards the tops of the houses. It was huge.
Miraculously, no one was injured as a blimp came to rest in the middle of the street. Almost immediately, Daly City officials were on the scene. When Navy personnel arrived, they were stunned to discover that there was no sign of Lieutenant Cody or Ensign Adams. Apparently, the blimp had piloted itself straight into downtown Daly City. A search of the gondola left investigators perplexed. The door was latched open, a highly unusual in-flight position. The safety bar, normally used to block the doorway, was no longer in place. A microphone hooked to an external loudspeaker dangled out of the gondola.
The ignition switches were still on. The radio was still on and working. Nobody had touched my fuel valves. They were set up just exactly the way that I'd left them. We still had another 6 hours of fuel.
It's 2 life jackets out of the 3 that were normally carried aboard were missing, but there was no other equipment that was gone. The machine gun was still there. The other flares, there were 3 other flares were still there. The expandable life raft was there, and 1 more life jacket. There was nothing missing.
Lieutenant Cody's cap lay on the instrument panel. The missing life jackets indicated the crew had put them on before takeoff, as regulations required. A locked and heavily weighted briefcase containing top-secret codes was still in place. It was as if Cody and Adams had opened the door and simply stepped out into thin air. The Navy investigation revealed that Flight 101 had been seen by several ships and planes between 7 and 11 a.m. Some of the eyewitnesses reported being close enough to make out Cody and Adams in the gondola. In each instance, everything about Flight 101 seemed normal.
Coming in a bit, yeah. Yeah. See it now.
Speculation on the fate of the 2 Navy airmen ran rampant. Some people believe that Cody and Adams had spotted an enemy submarine. When they descended to investigate, they were taken prisoner.
Slowly but surely.
One outrageous rumor suggested that the pilots were involved in a lover's triangle with an unknown woman. One had murdered the other in a jealous rage, the story went, and then fled when the L-8 reached land. The Navy finally settled on the most plausible theory. There had been an accident on board, perhaps caused by a mechanical malfunction. Presumably, one of the men had climbed outside the gondola to correct the problem and had run into trouble. When the second man tried to come to his aid, both fell to their doom. A year later, on August 17, 1943, Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody and Ensign Charles Ellis Adams were officially declared dead, and the mystery of Flight 101 passed into legend.
After the crash, the L-8 was patched up and put back into service by the Navy. Ultimately, the blimp became part of the Goodyear fleet, and during the 1960s and 70s, it was seen by millions at sporting events. Few of them had any idea that the stately craft circling overhead was a fabled ghost blimp.
Next, a respected community leader goes into hiding after he is convicted of statutory rape and sexual assault.
Perhaps the most disturbing crimes are those that betray the trust of children. In 1981, a group of teenage girls in Danbury, Connecticut were betrayed by a respected community leader. Reggie De Palma was a 12-year veteran of the Danbury Fire Department and advisor to a local Explorer Scout post. But behind that facade of respectability, De Palma was a time bomb just waiting to explode.
In 1978, Reggie De Palma had organized the Explorer Post in affiliation with the fire department.
You guys want to go get the mats for me?
His girlfriend Connie was co-leader, and the group quickly became a popular after-school activity.
Oh, that would be great.
When I first joined the troop, my impression of Reggie and Connie were that they were very nice people, so it was just never even a question that you would not trust them with anything. I mean, you just tell them confidential things. And you would really feel like you would trust them all the time and go to them if you needed help.
Should we put them here?
Yes, put the
Bless you.
By 1981, the Explorer Post had grown to include 15 girls and 10 boys. They met at the fire station regularly and were drilled in life-saving and rescue techniques.
We're going to be administering 5 pumps in the chest. Right?
Reggie was supervisor of Danbury's ambulance service, and the scouts' training was often interrupted by emergency calls.
It's an emergency call. Let's get stuff cleared up. Out of the way.
The post members idolized Reggie De Palma, and he soon became a virtual hero, especially to the girls.
It's kind of hard to describe Reggie. Reggie was a lot of fun. Reggie and his girlfriend, Connie, they were easygoing people. They were easy to talk to. If you had a problem, they really wanted you to open up to them and get close to them. And, you know, they were good at getting people's trust.
In 1981, the Explorers organized a Halloween haunted house to raise money for an upcoming camping trip. It was a night which would burn itself into Terry's memory.
So you're 13 and you still don't have a boyfriend?
Yeah.
Have you ever gone all the way with a boy before?
No.
Well, I'd like to teach you about that, because I'm your friend. Are you my friend?
Yeah.
I thought that he was concerned with me and, you know, how I'd, you know, handle it, because we were at that age. And, you know, I took it as like a fatherly concern and, you know, something that, you know, he wanted to not be a part of, but help with.
Hey, are you okay? Yeah, just something Reggie said.
Connie came up to me and said, you know, we have to go get some things. You know, why don't you come with me? And we, you know, promptly went back to the house where Reggie was waiting.
Okay, well, here's the towel.
We went back to the apartment and, you know, she said, why don't you go shower and, you know, get some of this makeup off. So I did. Didn't think anything of it. When I came out, it all happened.
Hey. Hey.
Come on in, honey.
Yeah, we're just watching some TV.
That night, Reggie forced Terry to have sexual intercourse while Connie watched. Tragically, Terry was not Reggie De Palma's first victim, nor would she be his last.
I was 13 years old, and I did not go immediately to my parents or the authorities, because at that age, I don't think that you have any understanding even what's going on. You just feel a terrible amount of humiliation, of guilt. What did I do wrong to cause this to happen?
I don't know what to do. I can't believe he did it to you.
Over the next year, Reggie De Palma continued to sexually abuse girls in the Explorer post. Finally, they began to confide in one another.
Are you guys gonna go back? I mean, if he asks you. I've been back, but I can't go back anymore.
One of the girls had gotten upset about something and started talking, and it just started snowballing, because as soon as she said something, then the next person, and everybody started coming forth, and then we all realized that we weren't alone, that we were all in this group together, and that together we could try to stop this.
We have to tell somebody. Okay. Are you gonna do it? We'll go with you if you want. Yeah. Will you tell? Yeah. I'll tell my mom.
One of the girls' mothers came to the police station to report what her daughter had told her. So Detective Benjamin and I were assigned to investigate this, and I spoke with all the girls involved, and he spoke with all the boys.
At that point, you know, I was still very young in high school, trying to deal with all this. It was not an easy thing to just discuss with someone, to tell them. She was very supportive, she was very nice, and helped me through it a lot.
So what I need to know is, did you ever have occasion to be alone with Reggie?
Yeah. There was one time when I was at his apartment.
Okay, so what happened once you got to the apartment?
Gave me some wine.
And how much wine did you have?
3 glasses.
3 glasses of wine?
3.
Okay.
Right off the bat, when I heard the stories that these girls told, I felt myself betrayed, and I don't even know Reggie. These girls were so devastated over what had happened to them that I had nightmares.
To his bedroom.
The details of what they were telling me made me feel such rage towards this man. I had to get him arrested as soon as possible.
Why don't you just tell me what's going on, Russ?
5 counts of child molestation, Reggie. You have the right to remain silent. You understand?
Yeah.
You have a right to an attorney. You understand? If you waive that right, anything you say or do will be used against you in a court of law. If you understand?
On the same day Reggie was arrested, his girlfriend Connie was questioned.
She believed in him so much, she would have done anything for him. And she felt so insecure about their relationship that she even went this far to do these things with these girls for Reggie.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just have one more set of questions I'd like to ask Terry.
Just over a year after his arrest, Reggie De Palma went to trial on 9 counts, including 2 counts of statutory rape and 5 counts of risking injury to a minor.
On this terrible night, you didn't tell someone about what happened. Why, particularly, you didn't tell your parents?
I thought that they would think less of me, and that maybe it was my fault too. And Reggie had told me not to tell anybody.
Reggie
De Palma, the first day during the trial, it was obvious that he did not believe the girls had the courage to testify against him. He felt he still had sufficient sway over them that they would crumble on the witness stand. After the first witness was able to testify against him, certainly then his confidence had to waver. And of course, after the third girl had testified, he must have decided that he would be better in parts unknown.
After the 5th day of the trial, Reggie De Palma, who was out on bail, left Danbury to visit his mother. She was hospitalized at New Haven, Connecticut, 38 miles away. Although his car was found in the hospital parking lot, De Palma never showed up in his mother's room. A fugitive warrant was issued for his arrest. The trial continued without him, and on October 25, 1983, Reginald De Palma was convicted on 7 counts and sentenced in absentia to 21 years in prison. He is still at large and has never served a single day behind bars. His victims are now adults, but the chilling effects of abuse linger.
There are times when I'll psych myself out, like if I'm leaving work late, or, when I was in college, if I was walking back to the dorms or something late at night, that I was like, he's out there somewhere. He could be watching me right now. When I think about the fact that he's still out there somewhere is very upsetting. The first, of course, to all of us, the injustice that we feel because he is not paying for the crimes that were committed. And then again, the fear for other people out there that he could be harming individuals all over again and put them all through this living hell.
When we return, a convicted killer claims he is innocent, and at least one prosecutor believes he is telling the truth. In the past, we've presented a number of final appeal cases, dramatic profiles of men and women who claim they have been wrongfully convicted of a crime.
They were saying that they knew that their baby had been poisoned by either me or my husband. I was devastated. I was blown away. I just could not believe that they could even think. Ryan was my world.
In 1989, Patty Stallings was arrested for poisoning her 5-month-old son. When the baby died, she was charged with murder and later convicted.
Unfortunately, we can't undo the suffering that the Stallings have endured. And I apologize to them, both personally and for the state of Missouri.
After our broadcast, Patty Stallings was released from prison and exonerated when doctors determined that her son Ryan had actually suffered from a rare genetic disorder.
I absolutely did not commit the robbery or the shooting of the police officer. I'm a musician and artist. I'm not a criminal.
Tony Miller spent 8.5 years in prison for robbery and assault. Today, Miller is a free man. The charges against him have been dropped. After his story aired, a viewer who had been an eyewitness to the crime contacted the court. Miller's conviction was overturned, thanks in part to the witness's sworn statement that Tony was not the guilty party.
I am innocent is a phrase that echoes through every cell block and every prison in America. Almost always it is an empty claim, little more than jailhouse posturing. But as you have just seen, those 3 words do sometimes carry the ring of truth. A few cases like our next one deserve a second look.
January 3rd, 1972. 2 boys out fishing on Taylor Bayou near Webster, Texas, found evidence of a tragedy.
What's that right there? That looks like a ball. Guys, a skull!
It was a skull of a young girl. 6 weeks later, police discovered the rest of her bones, along with the remains of another young woman.
Like we got a pelvis bone. Come on in here and get a shot of this up close, please.
Dental records identified the 2 girls as 14-year-old Rhonda Renee Johnson and 15-year-old Sharon Shaw, who'd been missing since the previous summer. The cause of their deaths could not be determined. 5 months after the bones were found, police arrested 23-year-old Michael Self, a gas station attendant with below-average intelligence. Self was charged with 2 counts of murder. 20 years later, he is still in prison, convicted of a crime he swears he did not commit.
I did not kill Sharon Shaw and Renee Johnson. It was just all behind politics and wanting a conviction. That was it. Just somebody to play the patsy.
Imagine that you're a jury member in a murder trial. The defendant has confessed twice, and you vote to convict him. Later, you discover the confessions were allegedly coerced by 2 police officers who used a kind of rough justice, physical and psychological intimidation. As it turned out, those 2 police officers were criminals themselves. It may seem incredible, but Michael Self claims that he was a victim of just that scenario. Rhonda Johnson and Sharon Shaw disappeared on August 4th, 1971. They were last seen heading toward the Jericho Surf and Ski Shop in Galveston, Texas, 20 miles south of Rhonda's hometown of Webster.
No, that's okay. We've just got a couple more blocks to go.
Police immediately launched an exhaustive investigation. There was a great deal of community pressure to find the girls. Pressure intensified by the fact that Rhonda was the granddaughter of a prominent Webster City councilman.
I put in many hours, night and day, on trying to find out what happened to these girls when they disappeared. But I kept coming up to some loose ends. I was getting close, I thought, then it would disappear. All my leads would disappear.
We're awful lucky to have a couple of DPS boys on board.
In late May of 1972, the Webster City Council hired a new police chief, Don Morris. Morris and his assistant chief, Tommy Deal, came from the traffic division of the Texas Department of Public Safety.
Son, I'm glad you're with us. I know I can count on you.
Yes, sir.
The hunt for Rhonda and Sharon had been going on fruitlessly for 10 months, but within 3 weeks of taking office, Morris got a tip on a suspect.
Seems to me a few years back, a boy named Michael Self was
Glenn Price, another city councilman, suggested Tommy Deal check known sex offenders and mentioned Michael Self's name. Self had been arrested twice in Peeping Tom incidents.
I know you do a good job, Tommy. Well, I'll give it a whirl, Glenn. Bye. Bye-bye.
June 9th, 1972. At 5 a.m., Assistant Chief Tommy Deal and Officer Herman Morgan stopped by the gas station where 23-year-old Michael Self worked the night shift.
Say, look here, Mike.
What's up?
You got ESP?
Say again?
I got ESP.
Is that right?
That's right. And I can tell you exactly what you're thinking right now. You're thinking about 2 girls.
Well, I didn't know what 2 girls he was talking about.
Well, I don't
My
see
wife
why
and I had
not.
been separated,
Yeah.
and I was dating a girl, and I thought that's who he was, talking about. That's the only one I can think of.
Later that morning, Michael Self voluntarily went to the police station.
Detective Haynes.
I knew I hadn't done anything. I just went ahead and agreed to meet him there.
Now, Mike, I want you to answer some questions for me. I want you to tell us if you've ever seen either one of these girls before.
Self said he recognized the girls, but did not know them.
Yes. Renee Johnson.
To his surprise, he was immediately taken into custody.
Sharon Shaw. That's right. Cuffing. Why? We are putting you under arrest for the murder of these 2 girls. Sit down in that chair. All right. Mike. You know we already know you killed those 2 girls. We got the evidence.
Oh, come on. I didn't have nothing to do with killing no girls, and y'all know that.
While Self was being questioned, another police officer, Jerry Mitchell, stopped by to observe. Mitchell knew Self and says Self was not at all nervous at that stage of the interrogation.
What happens to somebody they get caught for doing something like that?
Mike looked relaxed, easygoing, kind of laid back. He was grinning. And I don't know that it ever really sunk into, at that time, what he was being involved in.
You got something to tell us?
Well, like I said, I ain't done nothing. I ain't broke no law.
Don't you need to be on patrol?
Mitchell left the room. According to Self, Chief Don Morris then took personal charge of the interrogation, and the tone changed radically.
No, Don, we're not.
What, is he innocent? You innocent, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Tell you what, Tom, why don't you go home and take a nap and let me in?
What you are about to see is based on Michael Self's recollection.
Yeah, Michael.
Don Morris, he started asking me questions, why I killed these girls. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about.
Seen a lot of innocent people, Michael. look like one of them. Now tell me about the girls.
Don't really know what you want me to tell you about the girls, sir.
He said that he wanted a confession. I wasn't going to leave until he got one.
Sir,
Tell me about the girls.
I don't know nothing about no girls. I done told you.
I think I'll go round up some stray dogs.
Hey, be careful out there.
Said, don't you have a guilty conscience for doing this, having to look Roy Johnson in the face? And I'd tell him that I didn't know what he was talking about. He had me against the wall. My hands are behind my back. And he's poking this nightstick in my stomach and said he was going to get a confession. You tell it. He was more or less a madman about it.
You getting tired of this, Michael? Yeah. I'm pretty tired of it myself.
I was crying, I was upset. He took his gun, opens the cylinder, and takes 5 bullets and stands them on in where I can see them.
I want you to tell me where you picked them up. I want you to tell me.
I was more scared than I was anything. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what to say.
Because I will blow your head off. No! Tell me about the girl. You don't
He closed it. He spun the chamber, and he points his gun like this and says he's gonna blow my brains out if I don't sign a confession.
Okay. Now, I want you to write down everything you remember about that day.
He had already beaten him half to death, poked him in the stomach, and I could see that he meant what he said. And I asked him, what do you want me to sign? He tells me that he'll tell me what to write.
You were drinking beer while you were riding around, isn't that the way it happened?
Yes, sir.
Less than an hour after Jerry Mitchell left the room, he returned. Self now seemed upset and visibly shaken.
Now, let me see what you wrote there. Let me see.
He was, in my opinion, kind of being led in the sequence of events of how they wanted it written.
We'll have to do it again.
I'd seen about half a page of writing on there by the time it was all over with. I think they had to rewrite that one. Something wasn't right in it.
I want you to write some truth. Now, let's start again.
Not being part of the investigation, I really wasn't privy to all the details of it, the whys and wherefores, but I do know that they rewrote the confession several times.
Self's confession, however, did not fit the known facts of the girl's disappearance. One glaring instance. The confession said Self dumped the bodies at a place called El Largo, 20 miles from the Taylor Bayou, where the bodies are actually found. Self's appellate attorney, Jerry Bernberg, points out other discrepancies.
There's the statement in here that what he did was, in essence, he choked one of the 2 girls. There was no evidence of the breaking of some very tender bones in the neck that necessarily would have been damaged if in fact, he had choked one of the girls to death. There is this claim that he went to Sharon Shaw's house. Well, Sharon Shaw's family contradicts that, so she wasn't home that day. That didn't occur. There's the statement that the girls were hanging out of the window and hollering as they were all driving in the car. And yet Dave Colburn did this very thorough investigation, and nobody saw the 2 girls that night, or anybody else, driving down the road, hollering, waving, and screaming.
I had statements from 2 girls signed by their parents as a witness that they talked to Sharon Shaw and Renee Johnson in Galveston between 8 and 9 o'clock. There's no conceivable way that Sharon Shaw and Renee Johnson could have got another ride and been in Webster riding around with Michael Lloyd Self at the time that they've gotten his confession.
3 days after Michael Self's arrest, he went against his original attorney's advice and agreed to take a lie detector test.
Is your first name Michael?
Yes, sir.
According to Jerry Bernberg, police asked Self about more area murders.
Yes.
Between July 1971 and February 1972, 7 other young girls and 1 young boy had been found murdered in a 4-county area that included Webster.
Do you know who caused the death of the two girls?
Yes.
In the course of giving him the polygraph exam, they say, well, now we've got this statement that you gave last Friday where you confessed to killing these two girls. Is it true? And he says, yeah. And the lie detector says, no, it's not. It's not true at all.
Yes, sir.
After taking the polygraph, Self says he was still so afraid of Chief Morris that he agreed to sign a second confession. It did not mention any of the other murders, but did contain a new version of the deaths of Rhonda and Sharon. In the first confession, Self said he struck Sharon Shaw with his fist and shoved the girls' bodies into a culvert. In the second, Self claimed he hit Shaw with a Coke bottle and dumped their bodies in the bayou. The second confession also says Self stripped the murdered girls of their clothing and tossed it out along the highway. However, clothing was found with the remains, along with an unidentified set of car keys and a crucifix worn by Sharon Shaw.
There was a slight difference in the two written confessions. But all I had to do was offer in evidence the confession I wanted to go with. And if the facts, the outlined facts, tended to support the elements of this confession, that's all I needed if the jury believed it.
You were out driving around 9 or 10 o'clock, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
2 weeks after Self's arrest, two Harris County Sheriff's deputies checked him out of jail on the pretext of buying him a hamburger. Afterwards, they drove him to places mentioned in the confessions and took pictures of him at each location. It was presented in court as a third confession.
He didn't confess a third time. He went on a ride with two police officers who had illegally checked him out of the jail to drive him around to take pictures to get evidence for a trial. They didn't discover anything new.
While Self was awaiting trial, he was visited by Dave Coburn, who was by then chief of police in nearby Cleveland, Texas.
Hello, Mike. How you doing, Mr. Coburn? How are you doing?
I'm not too good.
At the time, he looked very depressed and very distraught, you know, when I walked in. And I asked him, he said he didn't do it, and I asked him what had happened. And he had told me about Don Morris threatening him with this billy club and poking him.
He pulled out his gun.
Yes.
Opened it up. Started pulling out 5 bullets, one at a time.
When he made that statement to me, I knew what had come down, because
One left.
a year prior, I witnessed Don Morris taking one shell out of his revolver, hiding it, placing 5 shells in front of a prisoner, and playing Russian roulette with that prisoner, threatening him. And there's no doubt in my mind that he did that to Michael Lord Self. And when it came to the trial, I was prepared to go in and make statements, and I was never caught.
Said,
I don't know whether he did the Russian roulette number. Bottom line, all 3 confessions are consistent. I killed the girls. All of them are consistent.
On May 15, 1973, Michael Self was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. 3 years later, the town of Webster was shocked when Don Morris and Tommy Deal were arrested for bank robbery. They were members of a gang of robbers that had been sticking up banks as far back as 1972, 5 months before Michael Self was arrested. In early 1976, Don Morris was sentenced to 55 years. Tommy Deal to 30 years. Both were eventually paroled, but Tommy Deal returned to robbing banks and is now back in federal prison. Jerry Bernberg petitioned the court to get Michael Self a new trial. After an extensive evidentiary hearing and just 9 days before oral arguments, the defense got what looked like a gift from heaven.
It's been bugging me for a long time. I just wanted to get it off my chest. It was Sharon Shaw and Renee Johnson. I'm the one that killed them.
How did you kill him?
On April 2nd, 1980, a man walked into the police station in Taylor Lake, Texas. He told George Karam and State Prosecutor Douglas O'Brien that he, not Michael Self, had murdered Rhonda Johnson and Sharon Shaw.
What'd you use to kill him with? I don't remember exactly.
Douglas O'Brien represented the state when Self appealed his conviction, but now believes Self is innocent.
What'd you do with their bodies after you killed them? I basically got the impression from him that what he wanted to do was to get it off his chest and confess to the fact that he killed the girls, but at the same time not give information which would allow prosecution of him. Where'd you put their bodies in the water?
I don't know. It was beside where the car was. I mean, they didn't want to go through with it on the date, and it was like I tied them up with this black cord, and I tied them up, and I put them in the water.
His account of how he killed them or whatever was very vague and disjointed, but he did mention that he used a cord in which to tie the girls' bodies down when he put them into the water.
The statement by this individual indicated that he had tied their feet with black cord, something Michael Self had never mentioned, not found in any statement by Michael Self. That was the secret fact that the police had held back all these years. This guy knew it.
That guy was out of his gourd. He was I don't know why he came forward. I think he was unbalanced.
I don't remember exactly what I did, all right? I don't remember exactly.
What he talked about was anything that could have been picked out of the newspaper. And even then, he had it wrong. There's no question in my mind that this person who came forward was just one of these people who like to confess to crimes.
The individual was clearly a very troubled person with some flights to psychosis, but he knew the girls. He lived in the same apartment complex with one of them. And the most important thing of all, he knew about the black cord.
Despite the surprise confession and the credibility gap created by the criminal activities of Morris and Deal, Michael Self's conviction was upheld.
They have no corroborating evidence whatsoever. Nothing to tie him to any murders or to even being seen with these girls except this, which is not worth the papers wrote on.
Legally speaking, he's innocent, just from a standpoint that, number one, I don't think his confessions were voluntarily entered. Number two, I don't think there's any corroborating evidence concerning those confessions.
He was the type of personality that was easy prey for Don Morris, that was easy prey for Tommy Deal. It's easy prey for bank robbers parading as police officers, and that's what happened.
If he were tried today, naturally some of these areas would be clarified, these particular points we're talking about. You go back and spend more time and send better investigators out and make our decision as to whether to prosecute or not.
Next Wednesday, on the season premiere of Unsolved Mysteries. For 5 years, Bruce Kelly has been haunted by fragmented images of a life not his own. A life that apparently...
This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight, the season premiere of Unsolved Mysteries. While under hypnosis, Bruce Kelly was overwhelmed by vivid images of an American sailor's death during World War II. Later, he was amazed to learn that his vision of the sinking of a submarine actually took place 50 years earlier. How could Bruce Kelly relive in accurate detail events that took place before he was even born? After a killer tornado rips through Woodward, Oklahoma, the town's residents flee to a local hospital. The scene is chaos, and one of the survivors, a young girl named Joan Gay Croft, is carried off by two strangers. More than 40 years later, she is still missing. Pedro Santiago Jr. was his family's pride and joy. Popular, athletic, a good student. Then on December 12, 1990, Pedro was struck by a car in front of his house. The driver callously fled the scene, leaving Pedro to die. Join me for our dramatic season premiere. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery. What are you afraid of? The dark? Flying? Heights? Many of us harbor at least one secret irrational fear, a phobia. Sometimes when the phobia is serious enough to disrupt normal functioning, we will do almost anything to regain control of our lives. For a man named Bruce Kelly, the attempt to cure his phobias took him to places he could never have imagined. Bruce Kelly grew up in Glendora, California, a small town just outside Los Angeles. Bruce was a natural athlete who went to college on a full baseball scholarship. Bruce eventually became a sales manager for a medical supply firm. He married, divorced, and as a single parent raised his only daughter. Through it all, Bruce had been plagued by overpowering phobias, a fear of flying in enclosed spaces, which he believed hampered his career, and a fear of water, which was just plain bothersome.
Anytime that I got around a swimming pool, I would be afraid to even go close to the edge of the pool. I would just walk way around it. It even was to the point bad enough where I couldn't sit in a bathtub. I didn't like the feeling of water coming up around me.
I'm going to count from 3 down to 1. When I get to the number 1, you're going to be deep and relaxed.
Over the years, Bruce had sought help from several different medical professionals. Nothing worked. Finally, in desperation, he went to Rick Brown, a hypnotherapist who specializes in an unusual and controversial technique known as past life regression.
On the number 3, you're going there now. On the next number 2, you become a part of it. On 1, you're there.
When I was seeing what I was seeing, and I said to him, this can't be real, his direction at the time was just go with it.
Probably 99% of the people who come to me do not go into past lives. Probably only 1% of the people have spontaneous regressions when working with phobias. And Bruce did have a spontaneous regression to a past life. Where are you?
I'm in a submarine.
What's happening?
I'm drowning.
Bruce was writhing in the chair. He was actually moving around and going through the death scene. Tell me your name.
Johnston.
What is your full name?
James Edward Johnston.
James Edward Johnston.
The hypnosis session had taken an intriguing turn. Bruce Kelly had apparently been thrust into the life of an American sailor named James Edward Johnston, recalling specific details that seemed astonishing.
What's going on?
Bruce said that Johnston had drowned in a submarine, the USS Shark, during World War II. Bruce also said the Shark had gone down near Borneo, just off an island called Celebes.
Are you alone in this hallway?
No, there's another man in the hallway.
Bruce even came up with the name of a man trapped with Johnston in the submarine, Walter Pilgrim.
Everything goes blank, and there's the sense that something's really wrong. There's water coming.
Bruce told Rick Brown that Johnston and Pilgrim had both died at precisely 11:34 p.m. on February 11th, 1942.
Are there any survivors?
No. The memories were just like it was something that happened yesterday. They were very close to the surface. They came up real easily. At first, it was like I was just making it up. Like, this really can't be happening, this really can't be real, I have to be making this up. And I went to the library more to prove that it didn't happen than it did happen.
The next day, armed with the names of 2 sailors, a submarine, and a date, Bruce began a crash course in World War II history. Bruce learned that during the war, 52 American submarines, carrying nearly 3,500 sailors, were lost at sea. 21 went down in battle, 10 in accidents, and 21 more simply seemed to disappear. No one knew exactly what had happened to them. Incredibly, Bruce found that the very first American sub lost in the war was a USS Shark, the submarine Bruce had named under hypnosis. Bruce was also astounded that the Shark had disappeared near an island called Celebes. Once again, Bruce's memories proved accurate.
They also had a crew roster there, and on the crew roster was James E. Johnston, which was the name that I had come up with under hypnosis. And it also gave the approximate date of loss, which was February 11th, 1942, which was also the date that I'd come up with under hypnosis.
Bruce was further amazed when on the crew list he found the second name he had remembered, Walter Pilgrim, chief electrician's mate.
Hairs were standing up on the back of my neck when I saw it. It was like, oh God, this is real. I was in total disbelief and total shock. And there was also an element of excitement that maybe there is something to this.
Is your mother married?
No.
Is your mother living?
No.
Over the next 6 months, Bruce Kelly saw Rick Brown on average once a week. With each session, more details emerged. Details that appeared to come from the life of James Edward Johnston.
I'm going to go now to your mother's death. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
In time, Rick Brown began to talk to Bruce Kelly as if Bruce, in fact, were James Edward Johnston.
You're there now. Are you at home or in the hospital?
It's in a home.
Are there many people there?
Yes.
Bruce saw himself as Johnston around age 12, keeping watch at the moment of his mother's death. A young cousin named Elizabeth stood with him. Other memories were far less dramatic, even mundane. Bruce vividly recalled that as Johnston, he always made it a point to eat the end pieces from every loaf of bread. In another session, Bruce remembered that Johnston was born in February of 1921. As a young man during the Great Depression, he was enrolled in a government work program called the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. The year was 1938, the place, California. Bruce remembered a young girl there named Molly Lassiter, James Johnston's first love.
I'd like to move forward to a time when you're with Molly. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Moving very quickly now. 3, to a time when you're with Molly. 2, you're there now. 1. Where are you?
We're on the bridge.
What are you doing on the bridge?
We're talking.
What are you talking about?
I'm asking her to run away with me.
Is she afraid?
Yes.
What is she afraid of?
Her father.
And what is she afraid of her father about? Why is she afraid of him?
Probably afraid for me.
And what is she afraid that'll happen to you?
That he might harm me or even kill me.
Do you ever see Molly again?
No.
Bruce Kelly and Rick Brown began to research Johnston's life, and Bruce's memories checked out with remarkable accuracy. Johnston had been in the CCC in 1938 and 1939, stationed at Tule Lake near the California-Oregon border. In 1940, he enlisted in the Navy and served on board the USS Shark. CCC and naval records listed James Edward Johnston's hometown as Jacksonville, Alabama. The date on Johnston's birth certificate confirmed another crucial fact. The month and year Bruce Kelly had remembered under hypnosis were correct. February 1921.
Bruce came up with a significant amount of information that was well past being coincidental. There were too many lines of evidence that pointed to the fact that Bruce Kelly is the reincarnation of James Edward Johnston.
It could be the reincarnation of James, or it just may be some information that somehow or another that I've tapped into, and it means, you know, it's something else that's happening. I don't know.
Although Bruce's phobias were cured, his life had taken on a new and unexpected dimension. There seemed to be a mysterious synchronicity between Bruce Kelly and James Edward Johnston. Bruce's hypnotherapist, Rick Brown, made 2 trips to Johnston's hometown verifying facts before he finally persuaded Bruce to go there with him. Bruce's first visit was filmed as it happened. What you're about to see is not a recreation. On April 17, 1993, Rick Brown and Bruce Kelly arrived in the town where James Edward Johnston was born and raised, Jacksonville, Alabama. At the house where Johnston and his mother had lived, Bruce Kelly experienced a sudden, strong reaction. Again, these events were filmed as they happened.
There's a lot of stuff with back bedrooms right over here.
You feel that, huh?
Yeah, that's the bedroom.
Okay.
That's the room they stayed in. Yeah, we've been a lot of places, but this is... Yeah. This is doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. So I remember you used to come in the back. There was an alley back here or a dirt road or something.
Yeah?
It's almost like he wasn't good enough to come in the front door.
Moving to the side of the house when I could actually see the bedroom and I knew that was the bedroom, that's when the feelings really started hitting. Remembering that he used to have to come in on the back street and come through the back door, the back porch. I remember that. I remember the feelings of kind of feeling like a second-class citizen. They were poor. She was unmarried. I couldn't vocalize it myself, and somebody off camera said something to the effect of, you've come home. And that's when I got real emotional, because that's exactly what it was.
Say you made it back down this part of the country.
Afterwards, Bruce Kelly went to meet several people who remembered James Edward Johnston as a boy. One of them probably knew Johnston better than anyone else, his cousin Betty.
We've heard all about you. How are you?
Betty's real name is Elizabeth, and Bruce believes she is the same Elizabeth he saw under hypnosis, the little girl who was with James Edward Johnston when his mother died. Betty remembers her aunt's death, but not the specifics of the scene. However, when she met Bruce, other memories of her cousin, whom she called Edward, flooded back. Betty began to press Bruce for details.
Remember anything about bread?
Yeah, one of the first sessions that Rick and I had, I talked to him about always liking the heel of the bread, wanting to get the end off the bread, because the only reason that meant anything to me was growing up, I was the same way. My mom would bring home a loaf of bread, and the first thing I'd do is open that thing up and grab the heel out of there.
Did you open both ends?
Sometimes.
Edward did.
And I'd get in trouble for it sometimes, too. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Did you went to that house?
Yeah.
The second on the left?
Yeah.
Did you have, what were your feelings there?
Yeah, that's been the emotional high of the trip.
Yeah.
It was real difficult, real emotional.
Do you feel that you are Edward reincarnated?
I don't.
You don't really feel that?
I don't know. I don't know. All you know, I've been asked that question so many times, and all I know is for some reason or another, I have all this information about him. I don't know where it comes from. For me to stand here.
I
and
really
say,
don't know what
yeah,
to believe.
I'm him reincarnated.
I have
That's when it first
doubts,
came out,
but they're just certain things. Bruce said that Edward used the back door, and this is true, and not everyone would have that knowledge.
The older you get, the more you're going to look at something like reincarnation or anything that offers an answer. And reincarnation, regardless of what this religion or that religion or anything else thinks of it, it offers a solution.
At the Jacksonville Cemetery, a memorial stone has been erected in honor of James Edward Johnston. No one knows exactly how or when Johnston died, except perhaps, just perhaps, Bruce Kelly.
I was in my bunk when the attack happened. And everybody was heading toward their stations. I'd gotten into the first hallway when there was a depth charge. The submarine was rolling and moving. James got to his feet, and he'd gotten 5-10 feet more down the hallway when there was a second depth charge. It was obviously a direct hit. The next memory I have is the area that I'm in filling up with water and filling up real fast. There was another man in the hallway, and he was experiencing the same thing I was, knocked off his feet a couple times, and now trapped in this hallway that was filling up with water. The last real image that I had was the other man in the corridor. You know, that I